Thank you, Seth, for being on our first ever Diversi-Tea series here at Riverbend. Um, and what this series is really about is just kind of these very authentic conversations with people who are a part of the Riverbend community, talking about diversity and inclusion and how it affects the community, and what we think about it, and just our authentic ideas and feelings. And so I am appreciative, and this was came out of, and it was inspired by, honestly, our first conversation. We have very great conversations that just flow, and I love that. And I was like, this would have been great if we would have recorded it. So this was perfect, and I appreciate you being a part of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. And so this is Seth, our music teacher from Riverbend. And so, Seth, you want to tell us a little bit
Sure,
about
absolutely. And I appreciate you so much for bringing this work here, this very important work and conversations. So my name is Seth Meicht. I am the music teacher for grades 1 through 8. This is my 6th year here at Riverbend. I also have a daughter that goes to Riverbend, and she's in 3rd grade. So we have both been here for 6 years. We're happy to be on this journey with you as well, and with our school. So looking forward to really getting the work done and, hitting the ground running, as it were, to really, make some progress in a lot of these important ways.
Oh, yeah. And your daughter is definitely, I always say that, like, I'm in a very appropriate way in love with your family. I love your family. Your daughter is definitely a force to be reckoned with, so I appreciate all of the work that you two parents are doing with her. So thank you.
Yes.
So let's get started.
Yeah.
The first question. Okay. So how have you incorporated DEI in music here at Riverbend?
Yeah, I think it's a really wide open question that I've tried to deal with in lots of ways, both small ways and kind of things that can happen very quickly, choices that can be in the now, and then bigger picture items too, as far as long-term views. So I've found that, I guess, thinking about the choices that I make with what I present to the students in examples in music. So whether it's audio examples, video examples, talking about music from around the globe, just kind of making every thought of when I'm sharing something with the students, how does that fit in a kind of global perspective, in a diverse perspective, so that there is acknowledgement, representation, and kind of clarity in the kind of multiple ways of seeing things. On a very base level, I consciously search out, examples that, I search out examples that Black people are performing and playing. So when I am having examples or Black people or women, people of color in, just as basic as, I'm only stammering because I'm just kind of, I'm just going to cut right to it because there are some basic things. But if I'm looking for an example of an orchestral piece, I am going to search for a conductor who is a woman or a conductor who is a person of color, because that exists, but there's really a lot out there that just shows kind of white men as leaders of orchestras, right? And that's kind of a easy thing, and then that is kind of through all examples. So whether we're playing, a piece by a pianist, or looking at violin music and making sure that I show that instrument in kind of all its facets and not just kind of one way.
I like that. I remember one of the first things that you said to me when I sat down with you in one of our last 30-minute conversations. you spoke to the fact that people of color were kind of like the first in a lot of genres of music. And I so appreciated that because that showed me that you were light years ahead of many music teachers who sometimes don't really even admit that, right?
Yeah. I mean, as a jazz musician and that is my love and my passion is listening to John Coltrane and being a part of that music. That is a art form that is created by Black people in the United States, right? And when you look in the great musical family tree, if we think about this country and the kind of culture that has come out of it, and actually very interesting, I was reading the obituary on Greg Tate, who just passed, who is the great kind of cultural critic from the Village Voice and music and cultural critic. He cited the idea that culture in this country, whether it be music, he cited like music, comedy, food, fashion, is really comes from the Black experience, and then realizing that in this country, what is put out as kind of American culture is all African American. Just fascinating to think about that. So myself as a musician, as a lover of jazz music, as a player of jazz music, I can look at music history and think about blues and gospel and rhythm and blues, and you can really track that to be, rock and roll, pop music, any of that is all coming from the Black experience in the United States.
Yeah, I like that. So I think that it's funny because this is definitely not on my list of questions. Yeah, I told you we just flowed, right?
Yeah.
So what I love about what you said is that you're a jazz musician, right? And so that shows me appreciation, right? Where it comes into appropriation, right, is where when you think about Big Mama Thornton.
Yeah, sure.
And Janis Joplin, right? Speak to some of that, like how many artists, especially back in that time, it was literally their work was stolen from them, and white artists they just kind of made money off of them, and they died penniless.
Absolutely.
Some of that.
Yeah. Yes, I have very strong feelings on that, as tying that into what happens here pedagogically. With our younger students, I might not explicitly talk about the appropriation, but instead I would just play Big Mama Thornton instead of Janis Joplin, and I would play Chuck Berry instead of Elvis Presley. Yes. These are important. Elvis is great. That music is awesome, right? Janis Joplin is fantastic. She has an amazing voice. It's absolutely fantastic to hear and be inspired by music. So as far as kind of diving into the bigger questions of appropriation, that's for more, maybe the older students here. But I think just kind of leading with the truth with the younger students, then they actually are just learning that truth through line and not like having to be told, oh wait, it's actually not these people, it's these musicians. So yeah, and I think that's one of my challenges here is trying to find that line of exposure and dealing with topics with the student body and finding the right way to share that and have those conversations so that it makes sense to the students.
Right. So I would say, like, when I think about younger students, right, I think about what conversations can we have? Like, I love what you said, and you're going to play the music, the original artist, right? Instead of saying, well, no, it wasn't this artist, it was this artist. And what ways can we have conversations about just kind of being your authentic self and being inspired by, right? But actually using your talent and your pieces, your writing, your voice, everything that is you, but being inspired by something else. Is that kind of how you teach kind of appreciation versus appropriation?
Yeah, right. And putting, the exposure. I feel that one of my main goals as a music teacher is, and this goes back to my training in the methodology that I was trained in. It's called the Kodai. So Zoltán Kodály was a Hungarian kind of composer and pedagogue. And he had all these, really fantastic ways of teaching and bringing music to young people. But the goal is to, what he talked about was a lot is creating a musical populace, right? And people that can, have meaningful connections with music as an audience, as a, a consumer of music. So we're not talking about people being, in the Boston Symphony Orchestra, right? That's not my goal, to create, students that are going to become these types of musicians. The idea is to, create a space where people can, be exposed and grow in their musical life, so that as they keep growing, as they keep, encountering and experiencing music, they can have a, deeper connection to it when they encounter it in whatever capacity it is. It's in high school chorus or in high school jazz band. Maybe they take piano lessons when they're 40. Maybe they go to concerts all the time, right? There's so much music, and trying to, have a deeper connection to it is really my main goal with the students here.
Yeah. So I love that. So that leads me into another part of what I wanted to talk about, was kind of how we express ourselves through music. When I think of artists like Ma Rainey, right, and how, she was very intentional about, expressing herself and her orientation, right, and saying that, and being proud of being a queer woman, right. I know that we sometimes have, as parents, right? Because we're both parents, so we can kind of think like, okay, what is appropriate, like,
sure,
for the age groups, right? Because we've had this conversation about, LGBTQ, the LGBTQ community, and how to appropriately teach inclusivity on every level, right? And so, one thing that I love about Ma Rainey is that she was her complete and authentic self. What are some of your thoughts on how to, especially as we grow in age, right? So think of the first graders, right? How can they say, like, I'm non-binary? Because we have non-binary students here, we have trans students here, we have students who are already, stating who they like, what they like, right? So speak to that. How can you, if they did a personal piece,
right,
what would you encourage them to kind of do to speak about themselves?
Yeah, I guess like stressing that authenticity, right? So even if it's not for a first grader as explicit as, your gender or your sex, the idea of authentic examples and representation, and maybe lifting that up, or showing that as an example. And I think young people can receive messages without having to know specifics, right? So they can understand, they can get a feeling, and that comes from the teacher too, right? How I express that to them, my excitement, my joy, my is it validation? Is it if the teacher is saying, there's a certain weight from the teacher, when I put something out there, you hope, right? Or that's part of the teacher-student relationship, is that then the student says, okay, this is something that I can, be aware of, because it's being shared. So I think, showing those examples is a way. And then I think it progresses then, right, and that's part of the larger community too, right, of having dialogues and knowing that there are similar dialogues happening throughout their kind of school year, and that then you can kind of integrate and work with other teachers and other situations, which then that is even more powerful for a student, right? To know that it's not just coming into music class and we do these weird things and then we go to another class and I've forgotten all this stuff, right? If we hear and see similar things throughout our day, then it can be more impactful, right?
Right. So I love that. So what you're saying is just really honestly normalizing different people, right?
Sure.
Like in lives, right?
Totally.
That's really it. That's really, and not just kind of perpetuating the narrative that all people are cisgender, heterosexual people.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that.
Totally. I mean, when you speak about it in these clear terms, it doesn't seem, I don't know.
Authentic?
No, it doesn't seem that radical, does it?
Right. It doesn't. It doesn't.
So, but I don't mean to laugh at that. That's, that it is very serious. And there are people that, can't see the nature of things. So I'm not, making light of that. And I know that people have many challenges, but I just feel that, to me, it seems very clear. So,
yeah, but I like that. So I love that, because most people struggle with how to present information, and it is just that simple as providing different examples and representation. And I love that. And I think that's kind of like, that's what I love about, bringing different perspectives and people into the conversation. Because honestly, I might be the DEI person on staff, but I don't have all the answers, right?
Right.
And so when as you're raising a very awesome kid, you don't have to present all the information and all the background information. You're just saying that, oh, look at this person. Right. And as our children grow, they start to learn more about the people, the person, their background. So I love that. I love it. Yeah. So when I think of, we'll start with COVID. When we think of COVID and youth kind of just being at home and how hard that was.
Yeah.
When we're trying to, and you're online, right? You're Zooming music, right? If you were to have some of our youth, and God forbid we have to go back in, right?
Right.
But if you were to have some of the students here create a piece to talk about how they're feeling, right? That's kind of like connecting to what's currently happening, right? Yeah. And that's like speaking about feelings and all that. How would you have maybe middle schoolers connect to movements, current events, movements that are going on now?
Totally, yeah. And I think that is, that's a great idea for the rest of this year, right? And I actually had a very astute student kind of make the suggestion of, boy, our material for the spring kind of concert or showcase, whatever form that will take, we should really make it a theme and really have a more, in-depth look, and not just kind of have these kind of various songs, and really have a through line and make it more impactful. So wonderful to be told that by a sixth grader and say, you're right, that's a great idea. But the times are so strange in a way that it's like this school bubble where it's like you come to school and it's you're not like seeing the outside world, and it's like I almost don't want to remind them of this stuff going on out there. But I hear the idea, and it's a really a fantastic idea of having them create some type of response, a musical response, a creative response. Because I think you can also kind of get into the lull, like the COVID lull, and you kind of forget almost. I mean, I definitely go in waves of not forgetting and realizing like what's going on, but then you kind of get in your routine, but then realize what does that mean for a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, and making sure they have the adequate space to, express themselves, and what better way than, the arts and music and visual arts. And so, yeah, I would say thinking about that as a spring project, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So finally, I guess I kind of want to know, what are some of your thoughts on how we can move forward at Riverbend, both in your position and as a school? What can we do more of, and what can we add? What can we take away?
Yeah. I think it's all about, the metaphor that works for me is the idea of, not just turning your back on kind of oppression and racism. You need to be walking in the other direction, right? The great analogy of the like the airport flat escalators that when you go to the airport, you walk on it. So the idea is that racism and sexism is moving down this way, and you might say, okay, I reject that and I turn my back on it, but then that escalator is still taking you in that direction.
Right.
So if you walk, well, then you're actually still not moving forward. You're actually just staying in one place, right? If you're walking on that escalator, so you have to kind of run, if you will, or you have to exert yourself even more to make the progress. So, what can I do in that capacity as a person in my situation is to, take steps in my curriculum, be a supporter, be an ally, be an advocate in any way that I can, to really listen as a white male, cisgendered male, right? My voice can be put in the back for a while now. It's a little, as a representative of cisgendered white male. But listening and being active, I think our school is doing that. We are taking steps. I'm very happy to be here and doing this work. I think having, for me personally in my curriculum, I was thinking when I was thinking about this question, there are, things that I'm thinking about if I talk about, hip hop or, modern R&B and finding ways to talk about that with kids and find examples and ways to talk about it that works for, young people. Trying to give it the credit that it deserves, right? The sound, the movement, the groove, the artistry. So that's one of the things that I've been thinking about just in my own personal curriculum, like how I can deal with that and playing examples or talking about it in a true way that I can share that with the right age group. So that's something that I'd like to work on personally. I think there's so many resources out there. So that's something we can do as a school, is making sure that we can even curate those in a way to get those to other people on the faculty, on the staff, in the parent community, right? So I'm happy to do that work and share in that responsibility as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many talented people, staff and kids here. on our campus, I would love to see us do something, write a piece. I mean, I'm talented and you haven't had me in anything. I mean, I sing, I write, I act, I'm acting now.
I know. Listen, the singing thing has you know,
I want to be a backup dancer.
All of my like training, and I've said this over these 2 years, all of my training is basically, singing songs in a circle and holding hands, right? That's how I was trained. That's what I do. And it's like, those are like the worst things that we can do. So, it's just been pivoting and trying all these other things. But it's like, my bread and butter is having a group of, 10 7-year-olds holding hands in a circle and singing. And so, trying to navigate our way around that. So.
Yeah, I would really, I think about it, like, I'm like, oh, Jessica plays the piano. I'm telling you, we can get a song going at Riverbend.
We got it, yeah.
It'll be the next movement song,
yes.
I'm telling you. It's kind of like We Are the World. It'll be the next We Are the World.
Yeah. Spring.
I'm a big picture thinker.
Spring will be total rebirth this year, I think.
I'm going to win a Grammy.
When we get outside, yes.
Totally going to win a Grammy.
We'll let it belt outside. I love it.
Well, I thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you. And that is all with our first Diversi-Tea. It was a success. Here we go.